Howdy, all. Hope all of you had a happy hockey weekend in
And even
Buffalo.
if you didn't, tough luck.
Yeah, there you go. Tough crap. In Buffalo, we had the St. Patrick's Day parade 3 days after St. Patrick's Day, which was an excuse for most of the people in the city to just get drunk.
Hmm.
As befitting my tradition, um, I, uh, I I heckled Chuck Schumer, the senator from New York, basically asking him to resign because I don't like him. But on the hockey, we have the non-playoff wall, the non-playoff wall of fame, and the Toronto Maple Leafs, the last place Toronto Maple Leafs, were officially eliminated late last week. Although Russ, it's weird. I listen to the broadcast. I don't follow those things. And when somebody says they've been eliminated mathematically, I say, okay, fine. You know it. I don't. They said they were mathematically eliminated on Thursday. Then on Saturday, I heard they beat Buffalo, and after the game, because Detroit had won in Florida, they said they've been mathematically eliminated. So they've been mathematically eliminated twice.
Which probably explains the problem with the draft simulator.
Well, yeah, yeah. I don't get it. But anyway, so we have to acknowledge the fact that yesterday, with their impressive loss to the Colorado Avalanche, the Edmonton Oilers now join the non-playoff Wall of Fame.
Yeah,
Uh,
we did a whole show on it Friday night, and we did it with noted guys from Edmonton. And at the end of the day, my takeaway was they're no better than last year, even with Connor McDavid. Which, and again, I don't even want to talk about the Oilers anymore, but it just blows my mind. The I will tell you what the most useless thing though in the world is, and this really goes up against anything that you find useless in the world, because I've seen this for the NFL. Those websites that tell you the percentage chance of a team making the playoffs are completely 100% useless. I'm telling you, here's a good example. The other day, last week, when the Flyers were going hot and they were 8-1-1 before their loss, and before the win in Detroit and before the loss to the Penguins, they had a 60% chance. But now you look at the standings, and yes, they have some games in hand on the Red Wings and none on the Islanders, and it's 3 and 5 points again. So I don't care what the percentage chance is, even if I'm rooting for the team. I just think those websites are just stupid. Maybe Kevin will have a different take. Kev, what do you think about those websites that tell you the percentage chance of a team making the playoffs? I think they're useless.
oh, we're not getting your volume, Kevin. If not, just log off and log back in. Sometimes that usually works. Yeah, can't hear you. Yeah, yeah. Just log off and log back. Yeah, there you go. It always seems to work for me. Well, no, it's interesting that you bring this up because I know I was getting prepared for the show and watching Sportsnet's Hockey Central, and they were discussing the point that if McDavid hadn't been hurt, would they have been at the bottom of the league as they are right now, or close to the bottom of the league? I think they would have been better. I don't think they would have been a playoff contender. I don't think they would have been close to making the playoffs, but I think they would have been, I would say maybe 8 to 10 points better than they are right now. Wouldn't you think, Russ?
Yeah, I'd say so. Couple spots, 2-3 spots.
Kevin?
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. Perfect.
Yeah, good. Okay, all right. Yeah, no, it's interesting about those websites, and it's funny because it feeds into one of my topics this morning with my boss is that in the old days we used to be able to sort of figure out what matchups that teams wanted to avoid and so forth, but to me there's less of that now. It's so hard to figure out, even the old standard thing is how you want your team playing at the end of the regular season. It's far less important than it used to be. Like I've seen in the last few years in this parity league, teams that aren't going well who suddenly get hot in the playoffs, and I've seen teams that have gone well that suddenly, can't do anything right. And in Detroit, their power play has been atrocious. But would anybody be shocked in the playoffs if the Red Wings had the best power play? I mean, it's just ridiculous how. I agree with you about the percentage of the playoffs, and And a lot of the things that have happened this season simply could not have been, predicted, to say the least.
We are joined on assignment by Eklund in Longboat Key, Florida. Hey,
I hope the internet stays okay in here. I'm not sure if it will, but I'm usually, as you guys know, at my in-laws' place down here in Florida, and we are going there later today. But this is the place we stay, which is a little bit a good distance away, which is nice.
It's kind of buffer zone.
Yeah, this is their comfort zone. So today, I mean, if I can show you back here, like, it's not too bad. You really can't see with all the lighting, probably.
I can see the palm tree.
There we go. How about that?
There you go.
Isn't that where you normally stay? Seems like we've seen this background before.
Yeah, no, this background I may have sent out at some point, but
No, at the in-laws we always see the parking lot.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, in-laws. Yeah, I'm up in the
on the balcony.
Yes,
yeah, in the lanai, as they call it.
Okay.
So yes, I'm not in the lanai today. Instead, I'm here. So hopefully the internet holds out well. The reason we're here is it was really cool. Our kids woke up very early. We got in really late, so my wife and I slept in, and we woke up and our children were gone. We're like, oh my gosh, we're empty nesters. We didn't know where the hell they were. We don't have any cell service here, so there was a few hours of like, what the hell is happening? So, but anyway, all is fine. They're with the in-laws. My wife just went to get us some food, and we're just hanging out. So,
yeah, lanai is Hawaiian for balcony.
Yeah, so there you go. So
You
that's.
sent your wife out to hunt for food? What kind of caveman are you?
I know. I'm a bad one. For sure.
Well, let's do the intro so we can get started here.
I thought you guys had already started because you were talking.
No, we were.
That was cool. All right, let's do it. Today's the 21st, right?
Right.
20th, right?
21st.
21st.
Hey, before we start, Russ, I was going to tell you, I was in a conversation with some of my friends about how we all on our Facebook have people who have sort of a reputation, or they're going to, political, and we were talking about people, on our Facebook, and I said, I always know who will be the first to tell me when somebody dies, and I said, it's Russ Cohen. It's unbelievable how quick you are on Facebook.
Yeah, but I'm the one who informed him of Keith Emerson dying.
Yes, you are.
Well, I'm just saying, Russ he's the Grim Reaper, man. I mean,
There's something to that.
It's out of respect. I do it out of respect.
Well, I mean, yeah, you always put rest in peace and so forth. But I'm just saying, I mean, does anybody dispute that? Who knows, Russ? Russ is on top of the obits.
We know nothing else about the Hockey Buzzcast by now. Is that you will come here and you will definitely find out who's dead. There's no question.
I have the funeral dirge on cue.
All right, the 21st. I just changed to my blog because I read it was the 20th in my blog today. How about that? All right, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, March 21st, 2016.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And crap. That's Kevin Allen, the esteemed Kevin Allen from USA Today Sports. The most talented of us all by far, so I'm giving you a nice introduction there. So
you can tell he's on vacation.
Yeah, and I'm Eklund. Well, you actually can't tell because I screw up just as much when I'm home. You're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday around this time to fill you in on what's going on. And we've got the greatest panel in the world today. We've got the classic, vintage, down-to-earth podcast to help us fix what's going on in the East, because my blog today is titled How the East Went from 5 battling for 4 spots to 8 battling for 7. And that's really what's happened in the last month. On March 1st, I wrote a blog that, and at that point I went with the 5 teams that I thought were, I kind of assumed Tampa and Florida were in, and I kind of assumed the Rangers were in. And I went with the other 5, being Boston, Detroit, the Islanders, the Penguins, and the Flyers. They were battling for 4 spots at that point. But since then, and this I'm reading from my own blog here. So anyway, since then, the 3 locks that I had, the 3 teams that were locks, have gone a combined 14, 12, and 4 for a .533 winning percentage. The 5 teams I said are battling for a playoff spot, a combined 30, 15, and 5 for a .650 winning percentage.
Well, let me read, because I was going to start out the show. Let me read the standings as they are at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
you've got Pittsburgh and the Rangers at 88 points with 72 games played, exact same record. Boston at 86 points with 73 games played. The Islanders at 85 with 70 games played, so they have a couple games in hand on all those teams. Detroit at 83 with 72 games played, and Philadelphia with 80 points at 70. So they have 2 games in hand on Detroit, and though I believe they'll use one of them tonight when they play the Islanders.
Yep. So here's the thing: way back when I was talking about on March 1st when I wrote this blog, the Rangers had a .635 winning percentage, and as did the Bolts and the Panthers. The Flyers were at .556. So there was a .79 separating those 8 teams, which is still pretty tight. You know, for those 8 teams to be separated by that little bit, right? Since then, Florida's now is the best one with .618. The Flyers have come up to .571. So now we have a .047 difference between these 8 teams. So really, winning percentage-wise, when you take all the games at hand and crap out of the way, these teams are almost dead even in a lot of ways. It's pretty
I think there's a reason why I didn't take statistics in college.
No, it's crazy. Go ahead, Russ.
No, I was going to say same here, but some of it can still be fool's gold. I mean, it is. I mean, the NHL does have a lot of parity, and right now there are teams like Pittsburgh that certainly seem poised to move the Rangers out of that number 2 spot in the Metro based on everything's working right for them. Their coach's message is finally getting through to them. They're playing like a cohesive unit where the Rangers haven't been playing like a cohesive unit in like a month. And so that's hurt them. And then the Islanders don't have their number 1 goalie, so that's hurt them. Yeah. Detroit's been up and down, but I still am not that worried about Detroit. I know other people are hopeful that they're going to just turn over, but I don't think they're going to. And so I think it'll be a pretty close race at the end. But, again, it's funny because at the end of the year, I still think we're just jockeying for position here. I don't know if anybody's getting ousted unless the Islanders lose 6 in a row, which is possible.
So you're still convinced that the Flyers are on the outs for sure?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, games at hand at this time of the year are both a blessing and a curse, right?
Yes.
I mean, they're a blessing in that, we've got 2 games at hand. They're a curse in that everyone ends on the same day of the season. So you have to.
Well, I mean, as an example, you have to now pick when you're going to use Anthony Stolarz and have him make his NHL debut. That's
right.
tough.
That's a big deal because Michael Neuwirth's injury is a huge deal. I mean, that's probably the biggest injury. I mean, let's talk about the Penguins for a second, though, because the Penguins had a huge, a big weekend. I mean, they go into Philly and they trounce Philly. They go into Washington and they trounce Washington. I mean, that's pretty incredible. They are, like you said, Russ, when you look at it, like they look like one of the best teams in the conference right now. They came into Philly, and Philly has a history of taking care of them, and they really shut down the Flyers in a way that I hadn't really seen since Anaheim came in. They were playing that well. Go ahead, Kev.
Well, I think the Penguins, to them, it's really all about speed. Like we've talked before on this podcast about how sometimes just one guy can make a difference, but in the case of the Penguins, it's really been a couple of guys. It started with the trade for Trevor Daley, and that got the transition game working. Also, Sullivan coming aboard, playing a more aggressive offensive style. They're moving the puck quicker. That's really helped. Adding Hagelin to the mix also has increased their speed. So it's really allowed their dangerous players to be dangerous again. And it's really not about, I've heard people say it's about the fact they've played better defensively. What's really about puck possession. Like I just saw one of the statistics, and the guy was making a point about the Washington Capitals, but he was also, in so doing, made a point about the Pittsburgh Penguins. If you do that corrected Corsi in terms of what they're doing in the puck possession and shots, it shows that the Penguins are the second best team in the league right now, and the Washington Capitals, a team that's struggling a little bit now and inconsistent, is 20th in the league.
Yeah.
And that's just been over the last couple of months. So I think the Penguins now are playing a brand of hockey that can be sustained.
Yeah. And the crazy thing about it, Kevin, is what were we all talking about the Penguins' weakness was? Defense, right? We're talking about that's got to be the Penguins' weakness.
Yep.
They are 31 I hate this stat. My wife hates this stat more than any. When you're leading after 2 periods, okay? She hates the leading after 2 period stat. She's like, well, we should not watch the rest of the game because they're trailing after 2 periods. But the Penguins are 31-0-0 when leading after 2 periods. That's significant. I mean, for a team whose defense we questioned, they are 31-0-0 and have outscored teams in the second period more than any other team in the NHL. So if you can you have to beat the Penguins in the first period. That essentially says like you have to get a lead on the Penguins or you're done.
Yeah, that's Marc-Andre Fleury's stat, though.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, he's the one who really can weather the storm because in that game against the Flyers, he saw a ton of shots early and then didn't see shots for a while. And actually, I spoke to Sidney Crosby in his scrum about that and the fact that they didn't let up when they were up 3-1. And he knew exactly what I was talking about and copped to it and said, you know what, we would have let up in the past, but now we didn't. And he still wasn't thrilled with their scoring chances, but he was thrilled with the fact that they were able to play keep away with the puck and just keep skating it out. And we knew their speed increased, and so their speed has sort of replaced the lack of defense that they have in the regular season.
Right.
Now, we know it's going to change in the playoffs, so we'll see how that transitions again in the playoffs because it's going to be different in the playoffs too.
But getting to this point, I mean, Pittsburgh has benefited from the fact, I mean, with the Islanders losing Halak and having to go with Greiss, and now with the Flyers losing Neuwirth and having to go mostly with Mason, I mean, the Penguins have an advantage because their fallback position is Matt Murray, and Matt Murray's almost as good as Fleury has been. I mean, in a very limited window. But the thing that can't be ignored here is Malkin goes down, and Sidney Crosby becomes Sidney Crosby again. He has played wonderfully. I think he's now third or fourth in the NHL in scoring when he was in the hundreds.
Player of the week,
mark of the year.
Yeah.
That happened before Malkin went down. He's been playing like that now for a pretty extended period.
Sure.
No, that's really true. And although there is something to be said about the fact that the Penguins in this playoff race sort of struggling, lose Malkin, everyone's like, oh, they're done now. And then they just, I mean, there is something to be said about the fact that both Malkin and Crosby have played better when the other isn't there. I really do think that that's the truth.
There is something to that. You know what the other thing is? They haven't worked in Phil Kessel fully either, so you kind of wonder how dangerous are they going to be, because if Crosby goes cold and Malkin comes back healthy, then Malkin can pick him up, Kessel can pick him up. They do have a lot of weapons that in the playoffs you would think if they're not all clicking on the same cylinders that somebody's going to carry them through, and so that's a worrisome stat for whoever matches up, worrisome thing for whoever matches up against them.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, here's an interesting thing about Phil Kessel real quickly. They mentioned that I wasn't at the game because I had the children at home. So I was watching on TV, and they mentioned the most crazy stat about Phil Kessel I'd ever heard, because there's a lot of crazy Phil Kessel stats out there. This year, in hits, who's leading in hits in the NHL? Matt Martin, right? Matt Martin has like a ridiculous number of hits. He's at 334. He's 50 more than anyone else. I mean, that's pretty crazy. Mm-hmm. Then Leo Komarov on and then at 281, and there's another Islander, Clutterbuck, and Radko Gudas, who's suddenly a scoring machine at 286. Phil Kessel has 9 hits.
Yeah, I thought you were going to. I thought where you were going with that, you were going to say, and Matt Martin has hit Phil Kessel 73 times.
Yeah, Phil Kessel more than Phil Kessel's hit anyone in the entire year.
Heck, that's 9 more than I thought he would have.
Well, yeah, I mean, are you surprised by that, Eck? I mean,
no, you can't play hockey and get less than 10 hits in an NHL season.
I don't know. We should go back and track a Wayne Gretzky season. He probably had less than that.
Gretzky had more than 10 hits.
No, I don't think so.
No, I'm back on that. I bet he would have had.
I mean, 9 hits. Like, if you're just playing, if you're going to the net, if you're trying to get a rebound, you're going to bump people. You're going to hit someone.
But that's not considered a hit. But the Eck, I mean, from watching him for years in Toronto, the way he has stayed healthy is he stays out of the traffic. He stays away from the wall. He stays in the middle of the ice. He curls when he comes over the blue line. He's got enough speed to avoid
traffic. I mean, with a Sullivan team, and Sullivan's not that's the crazy thing about this. Like, I think of Sullivan, I think of a team that he's going to want people to hit. Like,
this wasn't a Sullivan team when they made the trade.
Yeah,
he only wants him to forecheck, Eck. He doesn't necessarily want him to have big open ice hits. And so you could forecheck with your stick now, and you don't have to hit a guy.
Someone texted me, this shows the Penguins home ice officials are very honest about Phil Kessel, which is true because hits are so crazy subjective.
Yeah, it's a huge stat.
I think that stat falls under what your wife would categorize as just it doesn't really matter stat. Like you don't bring in Phil Kessel.
But 9, Kevin, 9. 9 is like
I understand what you're saying. It's funny. You know that's what you're saying. It's a funny stat. It's one of the funniest stats. Is the only has 9.
It's like you think about aggressiveness over the years. I mean, I'm sure we could find players who've won. I mean, Lady Bing awards who've had 20 hits. You know, I mean.
Well, for sure. But let's put it this way: when Phil Kessel is scoring at his normal rate, nobody cares at all about how he plays the game. But, you know, when he's had the kind of season he's had this season, then you bring up that 9 stat and you're going, well, he's not involved. You know, he's not.
No, he's a perimeter player. You're definitely a perimeter player if you're playing.
Like, that's not a surprise, though. You know, I mean, it's.
I know, but I thought I would have guessed. Like, someone would have said to me, I would have said, okay, he's got 30 hits or something like ridiculous, and I would have been like, that's crazy. Ridiculous.
Maybe the Penguins should hire the statisticians that padded Dan McGillis's hits years back.
Yeah.
That worked.
I would say Stepan Richer would have less than 9.
I think we're all willing to stipulate that number is a funny number. We all agree with that. That not when you have 9 hits and you're out and the season's almost over. That's just silly.
I think I'm safe.
I say all this, okay? And the big goal that happened in the Flyers game was a turnover created by a forecheck by Phil Kessel, which was not a hit though. They didn't give him a hit for it.
Wasn't a hit, right?
It's a pretty sad statement that Phil Kessel's probably eaten more hot dogs than he's put out hits in this season.
Oh,
God.
Yeah.
Let's go through these teams here in the East and talk about them individually.
I want to bring up one other thing too, because when I thought about that, I was going to have the opportunity to come on. I thought this would be a fun thing for us to discuss.
Yes.
Like everybody's on board that Holtby is the Vezina Trophy winner, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
We're all on board with that. He's had an incredible season, threatening Marty Beaudeur's record and so forth. But has anyone looked at the way Ben Bishop's numbers are settling in these days? Like, his numbers are incredible now. He's down to a 202 goal against average. The save percentage is 928. He's got a lot more shutouts than Holtby. He's a little short on wins, but because his team struggled early on. Like, I'm not saying the Holtby shouldn't win the Vezina because he's had an incredible season, but I'm stunned that Bishop is not getting more attention. Like, he's been good, you know, from October till now. He's been one of the best goalies in the league, and yet when I see the people mentioned as, you know, being finalists, he's usually not among them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he's actually, I mean, suffered in the sense that they've used Vasilevsky and Godlevskis more than the normal backup, and that's, I give him full credit for keeping Tampa in the race in the first half of the season, because if he hadn't been as good as he was, I think they would have dug themselves too big of a hole to climb out of. But I think Bishop, he's one of the 3 finalists. I think it's going to be him and Holtby and, you know.
Now you brought up an interesting point, because I've heard that said as well. But game starts. Holtby 58, Quick 58, Crawford 57, Marc-Andre Fleury 54, Lundqvist 56. So where's Bishop at? If you had to guess.
I'd say 50 or 51, maybe.
53.
53.
He's right in the ballpark with everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just the fact that Vasilevsky's good. Like, they have a legitimate second goalie. I mean, that we see, and Vasilevsky's numbers aren't terrible either, but they're not Bishop's numbers.
Well, no, but he's got I'm looking at it because he's got a 915, and I'm thinking, there's your Jennings winner, unless there's another tandem that maybe Ronta and Lundqvist. I haven't looked at the full numbers, but I think you're going to have a chance at them winning the Jennings in Tampa, even if Bishop doesn't win the Vezina, and I think that's pretty cool too, because it just shows organizational depth.
Well, what I'm curious at, Kevin, is Holtby going to repeat what Price did last year and be a nominee for the Hart? Because I think he should be a nominee for the Hart as well.
Well, I've supported that all season long, but man, you know, the consistency of Patrick Kane, and I know his numbers have dipped a little bit recently, but still, he's so far ahead of the field in points, and he's got a lot of game-winning goals. And now Crosby, like you have to consider Crosby.
Yeah, in the last 10 games, Crosby could still go nuts. And
well, yeah, I mean, and do you know what it reminds me of? Remember when Corey Perry started the? It just went crazy over the last 30 games. It just essentially made us remember only him when we signed our ballots. That's what it reminds me of.
Crosby's done, and especially if the Penguins. I mean, the Penguins are if they secure a second place in the division, which I think they will.
Yeah.
And then it's gonna take away the series we all wanted to see, of course. But
What's the series you wanted to see? The
Rangers Islanders. Everyone wanted to see that series in the first round, but.
You know what? I think the Islanders. I've said that I thought Detroit was the most vulnerable to be caught by Philadelphia. If the Flyers beat the Islanders tonight, I think they can catch the Islanders, because I'm still not convinced that Thomas Greiss as their number one, and I think they've lost 3 straight, the Islanders. If they continue to lose,
I'm sticking with my prediction, Mike. I'm still Boston bandwagon. I think Boston is the team that doesn't make the playoffs. I really do. I still think that. I mean, right now.
They score a lot of goals, Boston does. So
they're past. I mean, they got swept in California, as you predicted. I'm not, but the thing is, they're past that now, and they're still 6 points up.
Problem is, their next game is the Rangers, and that's in New York, and the Rangers are desperate right now too. So the Bruins don't get any help there either. So right now they're 6 up. I mean, they're 6 up of the Flyers basically with 3 games in hand. The Flyers have 3 games in hand. I still think they're the ones. I mean, what I've been really impressed with the Red Wings. But one thing on Bishop, though, this is a great point, Kevin. I think Bishop last year, honestly, I know players who don't win the Stanley Cup don't win the MVP, Conn Smythe, but I thought Bishop last year was should have been a Conn Smythe consideration, because he was. I mean, what he did last year, considering how hurt he was, I mean, just the fact that he kept playing. I mean, we were all kind of shocked that he just kept playing, but there were times when literally the guy was going on one leg and making saves and winning games for the Rangers. It was pretty. I thought that was when my respect for Ben Bishop last year just grew immensely. I mean, the bigger question is, does this put him as the starting goalie for Team USA at the World Cup?
No way.
Not even close. Yeah.
He's third. He's behind Quick, and he's behind Schneider. No way is he.
I'm not so sure he's behind Schneider. I think that's more of a toss-up, and now with Schneider coming off an injury as well. I mean, they're well aware that Bishop has had an incredible, season, but he can't move out quick, because in these situations you got to factor in the locker room politics. Like Quick is their guy. That's America's goalie. You don't take out America's goalie unless he's fading, and you got to knock him out. Right. And it's like Richter. Richter was America's goalie, and even if he had a bad season, he was going to be their goalie. And the same is true for Quick. But one other point about Bishop that I want to bring up, because I think he really isn't getting the attention, because he's really been good, from start to finish here. This is not getting hot late. Is we always say, well, we reflect on their defense, and I gotta say, I think most of us believe Washington's defense is a lot better than Tampa Bay's too.
Yeah, very much so. Great.
Yeah. So Bishop, it's not like he's benefiting from Duncan Keith, Seabrook, and Hjalmarsson. He's benefiting from Hedman started out slowly. He's now playing really well. People are saying Matt Carroll is playing better this season, but
scratched a lot.
Pardon me?
He's been scratched a lot this year.
Yeah, no, but I've heard people tell me that they thought he was a more defensive-minded player this season. But anyway, whether he is or isn't, but my point I'm trying to make is obviously that's not a you don't go, wow, look at that Tampa Bay defense. I love Hedman, but and you love Strawman. I mean, Strawman is a really fine two-way player, but once you get beyond those two,
And also, the Tampa offense is not nearly as solid defensively as the Capitals offense. I mean, the Capitals offense has way more defensive players that can play that can shut it down than Tampa does. Tampa doesn't.
What I wanted to add to the Capitals, we got to say that Alex Ovechkin's in the heart running.
Yeah, and that hurts Holtby too. That's the other point.
Because he's going to be the only guy to get 50 goals. I don't think anybody else is getting 50 goals this year.
Yeah, and it's so hard to. It's impossible to score goals. It's impossible to score goals, but somehow Ovechkin has gotten 50 for 7 out of 11 seasons. It's impossible to score goals. Can't see the net, you can't score. Nobody can score. Oh, wait a minute. Hope's got 50 goals 7 times out of 11 seasons.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? And yet Tampa is 500 in their last 10. They've struggled through it. They have been up and down. They've lost some games that you would never expect them to lose. They lost 2 to the Flyers. They lost to Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they lost to Toronto. They lost to Toronto. Sorry. They're struggling. The Panthers are still in first place in that division where no one seems to want to win it right now. I mean, the top 3 teams in that division are all at 500 over the last 10 games. Detroit is actually playing better than any of them right now,
because they're fighting for a playoff spot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a buffer zone there right now.
And so much of that is true, but I think that buffer zone went away over the last week. That's my point on these top 3 teams. I really do. I think that.
I mean, I grant your point, but the problem is when you're up 10 points with 12 games left, if they couldn't make up 10 points 40 games ago, they're not going to make it up with 10 games. I mean, what the Ottawa Senators did last year is an abomination. It's a once in a thousand thing. It's not going to happen. I mean, I think the only team right now that has that Philadelphia has a chance to catch. Outside chance is Detroit because they have 2 games in hand on them, and maybe the Islanders because of Grice. But other than that, unless Boston goes 0-11 or 0-12, they're not catching them.
And you know what else? The one thing the NHL doesn't have, and it's a good thing, you can never identify that team of destiny. Everybody tries. It's impossible. You can't do it.
But I'm not talking about the Flyers here at all, Mike. I'm talking about the division. I'm talking about there might be 3 teams. Okay, there could be 3 teams from that division.
Sure.
That make the playoffs. And, the Flyers would have to make it 2 for that to happen. But all of those teams are within 6 points of each other. Detroit, from Detroit down, and then Detroit has played, I think, less games. No, they played the same games. All right, so.
It's a little misleading, though. It is. When you break it down numbers-wise, it's different than when you break down. You're not looking at the back-to-back games. You're not looking at all of those things.
No, you're right, and that's something. But Detroit, I'm looking at the fact that Detroit has the easiest schedule left in the NHL. So there's something to that. I mean, the team that's chasing them has the easiest schedule left in the NHL as far as if you were looking at points. Points of the teams they're playing against.
But even that is misleading because, you say you're going to play Buffalo and Toronto. Well, Buffalo, they've been winning some games, and Eichel has been playing well. He didn't play in Toronto on Saturday. Toronto, they beat Detroit and they beat Tampa. They're not giving up.
Let me throw this out there too, and I thought it was interesting. You were talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning struggling at 5-5. Is it possible that down the stretch here, when everybody is just competitive as all get out, trying to get in the playoffs, playing as intensely as they have all season, is it possible for everybody to be playing well and nobody being better than 6-4 in a 10-game stretch because everybody is playing well?
And that tends to be what happens because the NHL isn't where the teams that have to win will win. When teams have to win games, that you can always bet on that. My point is, I think that Florida and Tampa, and to a degree even Boston before they went out west, were coasted too early. I think that this is a little bit like all the stuff you're saying, Mike. I agree with if there were 5 games left in the season, but there aren't 5 games left in the season. There's 10 games left in the season, and that is what 6 points in 10 games is not as big of a deal as 6 points in 5 games. And this is the other thing that's crazy. The weird thing about this, you always talk about how many. And I'm just from watching the Flyers' perspective on this. Okay, you always talk about it matters how many teams you've got to cross, how many teams you've got to pass. Right, that's more important.
Yeah.
Right, that's always more important than the points. The difference in that comes when there's a bunch of teams 3 points ahead of you, because those teams, some of them are going to lose. It's an interesting thing. So if you keep winning. With all these teams playing, when you're talking about 7 teams in a 6-point range, some of those teams will lose and lose in regulation. And that if you can win games, teams will fall. It's not like they're crossing 6 teams. There's actually 6 teams, and some of them have to lose, and some of them
are also not accounting for the games that go to overtime either, and that's skewed too.
Yeah,
a bunch of them do, but lately, and they we know the teams play for ties down the stretch here.
They do.
And there's no question that, the whole thing but it has gotten tighter. Yeah. And it's gotten tighter in the last 20 days, but we still have 20 days to go.
Yeah. I mean,
so how much
but Mike's point is a valid one. What Mike is saying is, look, over a 10-game span, we know historically and statistically that most people are going to be in the 5 or 6 win range, and there'll be some in the 4 range, and there'll be one team that's really, really good and one team that's really, really poor. So it's hard. Ken Holland talks about this all the time, and that is that over 10 games, the most you can hope to make up for, if you're looking at it logically, is 2 points over 10 games, because you're going to hope that you can go 6-4 and 7-3, because you're really not going to go 8-2.
No, that's exactly
right. And 7-3, and then you hope that's the 10 where they go 5-5. So if you can get that 7, then maybe you could gain 4 points. But what you're really trying to do is just gain 2 points every 10.
Right. You're right, and that's why I'm saying if a team can win 7 of the next 10, one of those 5 teams is going to win 4 or 3 of the next 10. Like one of those 5 teams is going to crash. It's not. They're not all going to go 5-5. You don't need them all to go 5-5. That makes sense.
Well, I mean, all could go 500 too, Eck. I mean, they're all playing each other. You're looking at everybody's going to be hot, and I'm saying with parity, they could all go 500.
I agree with that.
And the difference could be in where the ground can be gained is in head-to-head matchups. That's why
matchups for everything, and the Flyers have a lot of them against these teams they're chasing.
Well, but that's why I said that the victory that Pittsburgh had on Saturday was a death blow to the Flyers being able to catch the Penguins. Not only it was accentuated by the Penguins beating the Caps, but now they have 2 games left against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has already won 1 in regulation. If they get a point,
no question. No question. I mean, but then I also thought the Flyers' win against Detroit was pretty devastating for the Red Wings last week, and yet the Red Wings are right back in where they were before that win. So
they play the final week of the season,
and they play again, And the Islanders, the Flyers play the Islanders twice more, and you're right, they can catch the Islanders too.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that this whole thing is way more fluid. I mean, it's not as fluid as everyone would like it to be. I think that if we had 3 points for a regulation win, how exciting would this whole thing be? But that's another debate.
Exactly the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think it would change much. I really don't.
Well, they have done the standings statistically.
Yeah.
Kevin, we've talked about this many times. It doesn't count when you're getting 3 points for a regulation win. Like you're talking about teams that are playing for ties because they are playing for ties. If you knew that you could get 3 points for a regulation win, everything would change. I really do think so. If that was out there, because the way teams play when they have to do something, when they have to win, I think that 3 points. I mean, I know the way we've done it now, you can do it. But I think it would change. The
only thing I think it would change is I think it would make the team that is trailing more desperate to get that regulation win. Whereas right now, I think like Philadelphia, because they're so close, they just want to get that point for sure, and then go for the second point in overtime. Plus, because they're so good in overtime with a guy like Gostisbehere. But I think
they're horrible in shootouts, Mike. So that's a scary thing.
Winning that 5 minutes,
you're done. They have the worst record in the NHL in shootouts. So
we would reward the better teams. There's no question about that. So.
Can we talk about the sort of mini race in the West right now? Because
one last thing I want to throw, and then we're done talking about it because the West is awesome. Detroit's next game is against Tampa, right? So this is the Tampa and Detroit play tomorrow night. That's a 4-point difference in the standings between those two teams, and they play the same amount of games. I mean if Detroit wins that game, everything tightens up even further. This is what I love about this. I love how tight it's gotten. But continue, Mike. Go ahead.
No, but I mean right now, all the other teams in the West that are in the playoffs are battling for position. You got Chicago, Dallas, and St. Louis battling for tops in the Central. But the wild card race, the last wild card spot, Colorado's won 2 in a row, swept in Alberta. Minnesota's won 2 in a row. They beat the Blackhawks last night in a shootout, beat Carolina. Right now, Colorado dodged a bullet because Nathan MacKinnon looked like he had a serious knee injury, and they're saying it's day-to-day right now, although we don't know what that exactly means. Right now, I can't differentiate between the two who's gonna make it. They both have some flaws, and they're both playing well, Minnesota and Colorado. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, that's a tight one. I agree. I think one, I looked it up this morning, was 5-4-1 and one was 5-5 in the last 10 games, something like that.
Yeah.
Minnesota to me feels like the better all-around team for sure. They're not quite as goalie dependent as Colorado seems to be, but Colorado has more game breakers in my opinion.
I like Colorado because they have younger legs, and they were able to call up Mikko Rantanen, and if they can work him in, even if he's not scoring, he's another big body, and they've got a lot of big bodies right now, and that is something they've been doing that all year. They've been adding size to their roster all year, and I bet you if we look at it, they're one of the bigger teams.
And an interesting aspect of last night's victory against Chicago is they scratched Thomas Vanek as a healthy scratch. John Torchetti, their coach. I mean, that's got to be a statement with some of those veteran guys who haven't had good years. I mean, Vanek's down there, he's making big money, and he just really hasn't lived up to all the get up. So it's surprising that.
I'd like to. You guys should check out an article. My friend and my good friend, one of my best friends of. And our Minnesota Wild writer who grew up going to the Flyers games with and now lives in Minnesota and writes for the Wild. He wrote an article yesterday about that scratching Vanek he thought was the right move, but not the right person in his mind.
What's his name?
Dan Wallace. So Dan Wallace, check out Dan Wallace's article on Hockey Buzz, and he wrote that honestly, in his opinion, it's been Dubnyk and Suter have been the ones who've collapsed, and it's weird for him to. I mean, I really trust Dan's opinion. He watches this team all the time, and he says that Suter has really been a huge problem lately. Over the last couple of months, has been a giveaway machine, and that's really odd because we're looking at Ryan Suter, who we think of as completely invincible, right? But he says honestly, the way Suter's played, and he watches every shift of every game, and he said this guy has really been a problem. And if you're trying to send a message to the veterans that need to pick it up, he's like, it's Dubnyk and Suter.
Yeah, in that 7-goal game, I watched some of those highlights and a little bit more of the extended, and Dubnyk was horrible in that game. He gave up 3 or 4 quick ones. Like, he was just completely out of it. And you can't have a game like that anymore down the stretch. You just can't.
I mean, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say, I was just going to switch to the Central Division because right now, it's like, to me, it's a battle of who wants the title, because right now the Blackhawks are without Crawford. They're playing Scott Darling. Dallas is without Tyler Seguin. They're leading the division by 4 points. St. Louis has played terribly until they got back Elliott on Saturday, and I believe he had a shutout victory against Vancouver. I mean, Kevin, I think Elliott's going to be the guy now because Jake Allen, when he had the chance to take the ball and run with it, failed miserably, and I think Hitchcock is going to go to the veteran guy now.
I think that's the right decision. I've always felt that Elliott should have been given a chance a long time ago. I mean, we've talked about this many times, but I mean, all he ever has done was post really good numbers. That's been his crime.
I mean, Elliott is a little bit of like, remember Tim Thomas when Tim Thomas was in the NHL in the beginning?
I've heard of the guy.
No, but all Tim Thomas did was win, and they kept trying to replace him too. Like they kept bringing as a backup Thomas, and then finally they went with Thomas, and he had a season for the ages, right?
Yeah, I mean that could happen. I mean, Elliott could turn out to be a pretty good playoff goalie. We just don't know. So, and that team, like, because that division is so tough. We don't hear a lot about St. Louis, but that's a team that's designed to be successful in the postseason. They're hard to play against. They're pretty well-rounded. They've got premium defensemen. Although I will point out, I was really shocked. I was not looking up Kevin Shattenkirk, but I was looking up something else, and then I stumbled across his numbers, and my gosh, he's like -18 on a team where the other second worst defenseman in terms of plus-minus is somewhere like -3 or something. Like his numbers just so out of whack compared to everyone else.
It's strange.
Yeah, it really is strange. And I've had people suggest that he's more of a problem than a solution there, but he can certainly handle the puck. But saying all that, I mean, my point I started to make is down the path. They have big-time defensemen. Pietrangelo, they've got Boomeister, they've got Shattenkirk, who certainly is considered one of the best puck-moving defensemen, and
Parayko.
Yeah. Parayko has really come on the scene and established himself, and even Gunnarsson is a pretty good defenseman in my opinion. So.
Well, that was what I was going to bring up, Kevin, because to me, when they signed Gunnarsson to a 3-year extension, gave him a no trade clause at the same salary he was making right now, that was like exhibit A of Shattenkirk being moved over the summer. Because
I'll tell you this, Mike. I think you're right if Hitchcock comes back, because it's clear that Shattenkirk sort of outlived the Hitchcock system because he was an all-star last year. But if Hitchcock's gone, they may rethink that. And that's the whole thing, because Shattenkirk can play defense. He's not like a stalwart or anything, but he can play his own end pretty well. And the fact that he hasn't done it this year may be whatever tweak that Ken Hitchcock did to the system. And if Hitchcock comes back, he may say, go ahead and trade Shattenkirk. I don't need him. But another coach may still want him.
Well, I'm not saying he can't play defense, Russ. What I'm saying is the fact that they're paying Bouwmeester over $6 million, they're paying Pietrangelo over $6 million, Parayko's on his entry level. I mean, can you pay Shattenkirk $6 to $7 million a year? Have 3 defensemen making over $6 million? I don't know if Doug Armstrong's going to want.
The Rangers have been doing it.
Yeah, well, and look where they are right now. They're locked in big contracts with guys like Girardi and Stahl, who I think they're being overpaid at the point of their career right now.
I agree. I'm not saying it's good, but they also came within a game of the finals last year too. I'm just saying it's a way to have stability, and teams will do it.
Russ, I keep hearing. I mean, Jordan Binnington is the real goalie on this team. That he's young, but he's the guy that you know. Again, Elliott's getting shafted here because this guy's coming up probably next year or what have you, or 2 years from now maybe. But everybody I talk to, really says he's the real deal for sure.
No, he is a lot like Matt Murray. When he was drafted, he was very skinny, and he had a good Memorial Cup run. But they've been trying to build him up over the years. He's always been a workhorse. If you go look at his numbers, have been fantastic, and he's really good. Not only is he good positionally, but he's very athletic, but he can handle a large workload. And so I think they're just bringing him along slowly because, hey, look, they have Jake Allen. Now they've explored Jake Allen, and I think they know what he is. Elliott is a stopgap guy at this point in his career. Yeah. He may still get a Stanley Cup win. You never know, but I'm just saying, yes, Binnington will be the guy they eventually hand it over to.
They clearly didn't think he was ready right now because they went out at the deadline and got Anders Nilsson, and if they thought Binnington was close, they may have given him a look.
Well, but that's a Hitchcock thing. If you have Jordan Binnington on the roster, Hitchcock's never going to play him this year. No way.
Russ, you're exactly right. If Binnington was 6'5", he'd be in. I mean, Hitchcock does not like small goalies at all.
Well, Binnington's not small. I think he's 6'2".
No, he's 6'1".
Okay, 6'1".
6'1". The other, and people I've talked. I was talking to somebody about this just yesterday. So he said, yeah, he's maybe more like 6 feet, where Elliott is more like 6'3". There's and the other goalies too is around 6'3". Allen's around 6'3". But Hitchcock bringing in like a shorter goalie and more athletic goalie, that's just he's okay with young players, but they have to be big. It's like
just look at the way Hitchcock and Robert Esch didn't get along. You know what I mean?
Yeah. On there, and Halak that's why Halak was a disaster with Hitchcock too, because of his size. I mean, the size, they just don't. For Hitch, it just doesn't play out. I mean, I think the fascinating thing about the West still, though, we talked about this before, is where the hell do you want to finish? Like, if you're the other 7 teams, like, because as far as this plays out, like Dallas is right now at the top. No one wants to play Chicago or LA, really, right? They're the 2 teams.
I think Dallas wants home games because they probably realize the value of it because they're a young team and that could help them. But I think Chicago doesn't care. I don't think LA cares. I think St. Louis cares to a point, but not that much. I don't think a lot of these teams care. That's the problem.
Sitting in there with St. Louis, maybe they're happy with St. Louis in the first round. So what's the point of moving up? Like, I mean, they everybody, no one wants to play Chicago. The Predators and Wild sure don't want to play Chicago. So that's
you just want to stay healthy in the West. That's what it seems like to me.
Right. I mean, there's no way you can accurately steer who you want to play in the first round because
matchups are hugely important as to who you play.
Well, right, but the division leaders are so close as well. I mean, LA's got 93 and Dallas has got 95. So if LA wanted to play Nashville or Minnesota instead of Nashville, they really.
I think LA right now. I mean, just watching them play in the last few weeks, LA's the team right now, right? They are at this point, they're the hottest team.
I picked LA Montreal. Obviously, I was way wrong about Montreal because of Carey Price. I still like LA too, but I think if I'm Dallas, they're going to expend more energy to try and win it. They are this way, if they get home ice, that will help them a little bit.
I would say matchups are less important than they were, 3 or 4 years ago, because of the parity. It's so hard. We started this whole podcast talking about how difficult it is to project how a team's playing because there's so much sameness now in the league that where you can't be sure that you may feel, well, we've got a history with that team and all that, but you never know quite what you're going to see in a playoff series. So I think it's just a little less important, and I know statistically over the last few years it's been borne out.
Kevin, I wanted to ask with the GM's meetings that happened last week. I mean, the parameters for expansion were brought up, and they brought it up, but they didn't clarify. I mean, we've heard this stuff about Quebec is out of the mix when it comes to expansion, which basically leaves just Vegas. But they're leaving everything really sort of open-ended and not not going the next step. Are you expecting that there will be expansion? Do you think Vegas will be announced around the NHL awards?
Yeah, I mean, I do, and I've said this consistently from the very beginning, and all you have to do, it's not like I got a great scoop on this. It's just you have to follow Bettman's history, but I've also been told this as well. Bettman does things on his own pace, and there's no doubt in my mind that Quebec City is going to have an NHL franchise, but they're going to have it when Big Gary Bettman wants them to have it, and when it fits into the way he's doing things. I mean, if you look at the landscape, it would be hard to put an Eastern Conference team in right now, without more disruption to, realignment. And it's easier fit to put in. Plus, it expands the horizon to add a team in Las Vegas. So, this is just a guess, but, I think Las Vegas is getting in for sure, and they're trying to decide what to do about Quebec City. But eventually they'll have one, to be sure. And now all of a sudden there's a little momentum to the fact that maybe Seattle will get an arena, which means how soon before we have a second round of expansion. So,
is it possible? We talked about this a little bit that last week while you were down there at the GM meetings, that they're holding off on Quebec because maybe a team in the East could move there.
No, I don't think so. I mean, that's always a possibility. I mean, you don't know how bad anyone will bottom out, but they're not going to move Florida, and they're still pretty committed that Arizona's going to stay. So who does that leave? I mean,
we're talking about Carolina last week.
Well, Carolina, they know it works there. They just need to get that team good.
Yeah.
That's I mean, we saw what happened when they won the Stanley Cup and the tailgating, and the place was filled and so forth. So I think people are looking for conspiracy theories, but it's really them just trying to do it in an orderly way, because I mean, each team gets $16 million for each expansion at 500, so they're going to try to work two in at some point, and maybe maybe more. To me, the big startling thing was I had been saying for a long time that they should give expansion teams a better shake than they've given them in the past, and they're clearly going to do that. I mean, like I pointed this out in my story, but if the way it stands now, if Nashville had to give up its number 4 defenseman, I mean, that's either Ryan Ellis or Ekholm. That's a pretty good player. And look at Tampa Bay's 8th forward. They're going to give a pretty good forward.
Yeah.
So
I think some of those guys will get traded before that expansion draft, though.
Well, for sure. But here's the big thing, and Larry Brooks had a great column on this. And one of the issues is he's just automatically assuming this is going to get worked out, and that's one of the reasons why they didn't clarify all this, because it's far from being finalized. But if teams have to protect those with no move clauses, if they're forced into doing that, there's some really fascinating things that are going to happen. Because it's one or the other. If the PA won't allow them to just put them into the draft, and the NHL is going to make these teams protect these guys. So, you got to protect your guys with no move clause. Well, now
the only fair way to do it is that. I think the only fair way to do it is have to go to the guys and say, can we leave you unprotected? Just like you would say you would try to get permission to trade them. I think that if they signed a no movement clause for if I'm the PA, I'm arguing that to the end, because that's what you did. You signed a no movement clause to control your fate.
Well, Larry wrote a great column that shows with the number of no moves on New York Rangers that, in theory, they'd have to perhaps leave Ryan McDonough available because they have to protect the no moves.
Right.
That would be crazy, and that would be the legacy, unfortunately, of Glenn Sader that Jeff Gordon's stuck with. That would be a tough pill to swallow. It would be.
And four defensemen, right? So you can actually keep four defensemen. I'm sorry, Mike, to interrupt you, but you can keep.
No, three.
No, there's a way. The one thing there's so many different things. The one that if you kept four defensemen, you're only allowed to protect 8 overall players or something.
8 overall players.
Right. Yes.
You could do that. But not many are going to do that, but yeah.
But Nashville could. Nashville's one of those. I think that could do that. I mean, when you think
I would agree because they don't have any forwards.
Right.
But the actual thing that I thought was the most interesting was the 1 and 2 year pros who might have to be exposed, or who like a guy like William Nylander for the Leafs will have to be exposed because he'll be in his going into his 3rd year.
Yeah.
But the 25% payroll that they have, they have to expose at least 25% of the previous year's payroll. A guy like Joffrey Lupul or a guy like Rick Nash for the Rangers could be exposed. Now, I think Nash may have a no move, so that may exclude him. Lupul doesn't, and because the Leafs have cleared out a lot of salary, they may not buy out Joffrey Lupul this year because they need to expose him to the expansion draft the following year because they don't have a ton of big salaries. If they had Phaneuf or had Kessel, they would expose them, but they don't have them anymore. So now they'd have to keep a salary around for an extra year just to expose it to the expansion.
Yeah, but that happened last expansion too. I mean, it was the goalie shuffle, if you remember.
Right.
You had to expose a goalie, so teams were trading for goalies to make them available. So I mean, they'll be and Russ is right. These GMs are going to figure out who's vulnerable, and they're going to trade them to players to teams that have room. And so instead of losing a forward, Tampa Bay will trade that forward to Nashville, who has room for a forward. So
it's all the better for Hockey Buzz. We always like the trades. That'll be good. That'll be more interesting all around. At least
I have to run, guys. So I hope to tune in later this week. But we'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Kevin.
You know what? There's one more part to this though, because guys' contracts change. I noticed Girardi goes from a no move to a no trade. I think Rick Nash does the same thing by then, and so they're going to have to differentiate that because you're not going to have to protect a no move and a no trade. And so I think some of those guys with those contracts changing will make a difference too, and they're going to have to sort of differentiate that.
I think a no trade is a no trade. To me, that's at the end of the day.
Well, it's not the same as a no move. That's the thing. They have to stipulate.
It pretty much is, though. I mean, if you were making an argument for the NHLPA, you could say it's the same.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is they're going to have to stipulate the rule of what if it's a no move, yes, you have to protect him. If it's a no trade, well, you're not trading him. He's in an expansion draft. A no trade guy can be sent to the minors. So, there's.
Here's the thing, though. You know what this does? What this does to the PA is they're basically going to make a decision on this, and then that will affect new contracts waiting for the next expansion because then there are going to be a lot of GMs that are going to say there is no way in heck that I am going to put a no trade or a no move on you. Sorry, because there's another expansion draft coming up, and I'm just not doing it. And so all of a sudden, that's going to be a very hard contract to get for players.
Or what about this? If you have to protect the guys with no movement clauses, give guys no movement clauses short term, and put yourself in a position where if it runs out to, and that's the other scenario. Sorry, the other scenario is that those guys were automatically protected.
Right.
That's the way of protecting more players. You could give a guy a 1-year contract with a no movement clause for those 2 years, or a 2-year contract, or whatever, and now you have him protected, and you wouldn't have to. You automatically.
That could be the case, but then you could kill yourself cap-wise down the road. But yeah.
Oh, yeah. No question. We got to go to the end. We got to get going. But let's go to the NHL. Here we go. Live from Florida. Here's. Hold on.
Oh, that was horrible.
No. Edmonton Oilers, who have done something with Lady Luck to be in this spot all the time, but yes, and the hockey world will freak out like never before.
Freak out. Twitter will break.
Atom bomb in Alberta.
Toronto is the second team this time, and Winnipeg.
Twitter will break if that happens. There's no
If this happens.
But you weren't on when I talked about this. If I would have told you at the beginning of the season that the Edmonton Oilers would be just as bad off this year with Connor McDavid, regardless of his circumstances, than without, what would you have said?
You're a damn fool. That's what I would have said.
Yeah, but you say that all the time.
No, I would have meant it. I would have meant it 100%. I would have said, that's ridiculous, Russ. What are you smoking?
It's crazy. There's no explaining it.
I mean, it is. It really just. I mean, the injury, of course, hurt, but.
But they have a goalie this year. They didn't even have a goalie last year.
I know, and these other guys should be better without Connor McDavid. They should be improving. This is crazy. Even without Connor McDavid, they should be better, right? So.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's insane, and I don't know. I mean, and it's not they've changed the coach. They've changed. I mean, what they haven't done is they haven't just gotten the right players in. They just haven't got.
One other thing that we didn't mention about the expansion team that I think is important, because Mike and I volleyed it around last week. The team that gets the expansion, which we know is Las Vegas, they will get no lower than third in that draft. They will be guaranteed at least a top 3 pick.
Right.
Yeah,
That's been said.
Yeah, and the date has been set for the lottery, April 30th, which is the third Saturday of the playoffs. So, I think a lot of people in Toronto will be watching that.
Order your Edmonton Oilers, Austin Matthews jerseys now.
Oh God.
They'll be here in time for April 30th's draft. You might as well just do it. Remember that the Buzz, it's just hockey. We will talk to you later. Have a good week, guys. But, yeah. Bye. Mike, you got to stop the show.
Oh.